tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, Cardinal Sin Nation. It is I, Cardinal Sin. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Walter Bosley. And I will grab his bio so I can read it to you. Walter Bosley is an investigator of historical occult mysteries, author of pulp fiction novels, and a screenwriter who has appeared on History Channel's Ancient Aliens. After 19 years in national security, Walter Bosley is a licensed private investigator in California, where he also runs his small press publishing company, Lost Continent Library, founded in 2002. In October, it will be the 20th anniversary of Lost Continent Library. Bosley has traveled much of the world both on the job and off, including trips through Mexico and South America with David Hatcher Childress. Walter Bosley was born in San Diego, California, and attended SDSU, where he earned a BA in journalism. He was employed by the FBI and is an inactive reserve officer in the U.S. Air Force, for which he served as a special agent of the AFOSI while on active duty, and then worked as a counterterrorism operational consultant for 6 years following military service. Bosley spends his time in between private investigation assignments writing fiction and nonfiction, as well as investigating strange mysteries. The latest news about Bosley's projects can be found at the following blogs: empireofthewheel.blogspot.com and lostcontinentlibrary.blogspot.com. Walter Bosley, welcome back to Into the Fringe.
I'm back. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Good
It's
to
a
be
real
here.
honor. Quite the treat. Now, we have a little tradition that we do with our tiki figures. So it's time for us to pour up, and we're going to go Gorn versus Gorn.
There we go.
Boy, you're kind of dark there, Walter.
Yeah, let me oh, you know what? What I'll do is I'll move this back up to the top.
Now we can see you.
Yeah, there we go.
So I have CBD strawberry lime sparkling watermelon water.
Mm-hmm. I've got this bubbly bounce. It's caffeinated sparkling water, triple berry flavor.
And I also have Rockstar punched strawberry.
Oh, yeah,
It's the only one that doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in it. So
I used to love in fact, it was, if I'm not mistaken, was it Rockstar? It was a blue can. I think it was Rockstar, and I think that was the one in which I overdosed on guarana seed and had the most vivid, wildest dream, the most vivid dream I've ever had. It was.
Was it a good dream?
The dream itself was good. I would not want to go through the vertigo that I suffered for 4 days straight.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and pour up.
Oh, there we go.
Get my Gorn here.
That's cool that you were able to get the same Gorn.
I don't know if it's the same Gorn, but I
It
do
is,
know that it is a Gorn.
You got it from the same place, right?
Geeky Tikis.
Yeah, Geeky Tikis.
And then I'll go ahead and get my strawberry on.
Yeah, I had another one of these open. I'm going to go ahead and fill that up too. Good thinking. There we go. Oh, I had me some, you'll appreciate this considering the Gorn. I had some tea before. Guess who that
Ooh,
is?
nice looking cup.
Yeah, so.
Did you know that I actually met the guy that, L'chaim? Oh, that's good. I actually met the guy that played the Gorn in the original series.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, my brother and I were at a Star Trek convention in Minneapolis, and he was there, and he had his little, table, and I asked him some questions, and he was like, "Ask me those when I'm on stage." So I did.
Now, was he one of their regular guys? Their regular?
I think he was a stunt man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I have another little treat for you.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. This is one of the models you sent me.
Oh, cool. Let's make you big.
This is the Grim Reaper model. And
wait a second here. There we go.
And I really, really like this model, the figure itself and the features. I mean,
it's beautiful. You did a great job painting it.
Oh, thanks. I really enjoy the painting part because it really makes it come alive. And to be honest, I wished I would have learned dry brush techniques years ago when I was a kid. Because wow, it just makes all the difference in the world. Just simple dry brush.
His hourglass really pops out,
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, what I like about the figure models better than airplanes, and for instance, with airplanes, which I love building airplanes, but the bane of airplanes for me is I'm terrible right now at canopies, because I don't have a steady hand at the moment. So the smaller the airplane, the more difficult it is for me to do the canopy glass straight. And with the figure models, there's no canopies. But I love figure models because, being a movie fan, a horror fan in particular, it's just really cool to have these little statues of the horror theme I love so much. This was not so much a character from a film, as I think Mobius put this out as kind of an homage to the Aurora kits. I don't think this was an original Aurora.
No, this was it wasn't even a Polar Lights.
Right. This is a Mobius original.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, kudos to them, because it really is... it's really a cool model. So I thank you again for this, because in my in the Aurora models group I'm in, I'm one of the cool
everybody
kids
was jealous.
Yeah, with a bunch of likes. Well, a bunch of guys were posting theirs. There's a lot of guys there who have built this kit. Cool. And it's interesting to see all the different color schemes and such. So it was cool. You got me some cool points. And the next one, I've been thinking about this one being the next figure model, is the Robbie the Robot that you sent me. And as I said, I want to get the color of that one just right, because if you recall, when you watch that film and when you look at pictures from the film,
Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, Forbidden Planet. The shade of blue of Robbie the Robot, to my eye, is a particular shade, almost like what back in the 80s they called a midnight blue. And I want to get that shade just right. So I'm working on that. In fact, I think I said in the past, I'm just going to buy what I think might be the colors and do some test sprays on some.
And mix them together. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what it is I think what it is I can use a flat black primer.
Right.
With the right color blue, metallic gloss over the flat black. And I think I'll capture that perfect shade of Robbie, because he's not he's not blue,
and he's not black.
He's not black. It's almost like there's a dark gunmetal gray in the mix, right? And so, but I really want the colors on Robbie to if I can get them exact, that'll be really cool. So I think Robbie will be the next, between all the things I'm doing. I'm working on the film too, which,
well, if you do Robbie the robot half as well as you did that Grim Reaper, it'll be an awesome model.
Thanks. Yeah,
That's really good job.
Thanks. This is one of my favorites. So cool.
You'll have to send me a picture of that.
Oh yeah, I will. I'm going to be taking some pictures and putting in some backgrounds, dramatic backgrounds. So I'll send you a photo of this against a graphic of an old cemetery.
Cool.
So it should be pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to that.
And I think you're right. I think we do have the exact same going.
Oh yeah, it's got to be. If you got yours at Geeky Tiki's,
yeah, that's
the one that they do. Yeah.
Well. Skull.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Cool.
Well,
but I'll tell you, all this has gone into, and will go into the skills I'm using on the film too, which the film features a particular concept we're going to be talking about tonight. So that's why I kind of segued into from the modeling into the film, because it leads into specifically what we're talking about. Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
The Kaleidoscope Grimoire shirt. Yeah. I'm being lazy man tonight just because I've spent a week with fevers every night, and
man.
I'm going for comfort. Well, I got it could be something as simple as rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
So you know how it is when we're getting into that age range, right? A couple of,
Speaking of which, I'm currently under a severe thunderstorm watch.
Okay.
And it was raining a little while ago, although it seems to be daytime behind my green screen. So if we keep our fingers crossed, everything should work out.
Excellent. Okay.
Let's see.
So anyway, all that to say, I'm going for comfort tonight with the lightweight shirt. And
absolutely.
But thank you for wearing that shirt. That's
because we have so many people that were very patient while we were dealing with our audio issues.
And thank all of you.
I do want to thank Phantom Boomer for being here, and Pat S., and Malaya Grimm, and Michael Beacom, and Rui is here. Hail.
Hey, Rui.
Pat S., Ari is here. Hello, sinners. On to your derivative, Jill. Michael Beacom says, doing some D&D figurine work, so maybe away from the keyboard, but lurking and listening. Ooh. And of course, everyone's favorite superhero, Canadian Spider-Man is here.
Speaking of D&D figures, I've got these little guys I've been working on too.
Nice.
Yeah, this was.
Have you caught the new episode of Stranger Things yet?
I've watched 2 episodes of the new season, and I got it.
Don't spoil it, because I haven't seen any.
Yeah, I just started the 3rd and was just kind of burnt out the other night, so I got to pick it back up here this week.
And Skogly is here. Cheers. Ree is here. Hail to Jonocide. Lord Ludicrous.
Cool.
River Dogma Pitbull is here.
Thank you all for the good word on the...
Who says, glad to see Walter is still kicking.
Oh, hell yeah.
Cam's Crash Courses is here. And... Tim's Talk is here. The Pop Culture Curator is here. Hail. Herc 130 is here. CC Karaoke is here. He says, count me in for time travel. So, yes, we're going to be dealing with a subject that is a little bit... I mean, during the intro, I do say one of the things that we deal with is time skips, but not time travel, per se. So, let me ask you, Mr. Walter Bosley, if you would please tell us what got you interested in time travel, going back to your childhood.
Going back to my childhood, I think is like most other people here is, you see it in films, right? You see it on TV, and it's quite the dramatic literary device, right?
It is kind of alluring. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think initially, of course, it was the George Powell film. I think that was a 1963 film.
1953?
63.
Oh, no. One of these again.
But from the
War of the Worlds.
Yeah, you're thinking of War of the Worlds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the 50s. But the Time Machine.
Oh, the Time Machine.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I think is 63.
Yep.
Might have been 60, but with Rod Taylor. And, that was a favorite when I was a kid. Not too crazy about the remake.
I loved that movie. It would play here in the Kansas City market Sunday afternoons at noon. They would have science fiction adventure theater, and they played that one all the time.
You mean the original?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The remake isn't even worth mentioning.
Herc 130, Miss Bosley, I got your book. Sure, you're welcome. I'm glad you got it. I'm sorry it took me forever. Yeah, that film, it was just so much fun. The Morlocks, of course, are awesome villain creatures. And, I like Guy Pearce as an actor. And I thought, okay, cool, Guy Pearce, Time Machine, all right. But
was he in that?
Yeah, he's in the remake. And it just seemed to look like a bunch of other movies. And now Jeremy Irons as the head, creepy Morlock was excellent. So it had...
Wow. I guess I really didn't pay attention. I didn't realize either of them were in that movie.
Oh, yeah. It had stuff in it that's cool and worked, but not enough for me to watch it again.
Yeah, I thought it was not even worth the first watch.
Yeah, it was. I saw it at the theater, and it was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, the zero rewatchability for sure.
Right. But the original, just fantastic. I wish somebody would do a model kit of the machine from the George Powell.
There is one. I've seen one. Not in person, but I've seen one on somebody's shelf,
Oh,
So,
okay.
I know there's one out there somewhere. Or you know what? I apologize. I'm wrong. I interviewed Gary Ambrosia on Monday, and he's a collector and used to work for all these studios in Hollywood, and now he restores, like stuff from the original mold, and that kind of stuff, and it's, you can't even tell that it's not the original. I mean, replicas and stuff like that. But he has a time machine that's like this big,
Oh, wow. Because remember, in the film, there was
not even as big as my hand.
Yeah, in the film, there was the miniature one that he used to demonstrate, right?
That's
to
it.
His friends. That's exactly.
That's the one.
So, man, I tell you, somebody should pop that one, as we say in the world of styrene kits.
Okay, so now that we're down to business, Walter, what was Project Looking Glass?
Well, in itself, it was probably something fictional. This is one of those. I'm glad you asked this, because this is one of those things that comes up that, similar to UFO world, we have these things that are talked about and are claimed and put out there, And even though the concepts might have some merit, the specific thing will turn out to be something fictional, like the Hanabu flying saucer thing, right?
Which is total bullshit.
Right, exactly. But there are other things in the periphery of the Hanabu thing which have some merit to look at, and unfortunately, the false thing will kind of discredit the legitimate thing, the thing with the merit. Now, Project Looking Glass, which are you referring to specifically? Because there is the thing that Bob Lazar used to invoke and talk about, and that's usually what people...
And before we get too far in, I just wanted to double check with you. Is this our giveaway today?
Yeah, that can definitely be the giveaway today.
So this is The Mystery of Ingersoll Lockwood.
Yeah.
Volume 1 of the Lost Future series by Todd Wood and Walter Bosley.
Yes, and that's a series of books I'm doing with a young researcher. It's his original research. He started bringing the ideas and the questions to me, and he had some interesting data. I found it very intriguing, and he had been sharing this stuff with me for quite a while.
And you encouraged this youngster to go ahead and write his own book.
And then he tells me, I said, well, you really ought to write this in a book. He goes, I'd love to, but unfortunately I'm vision impaired. I'm legally blind. I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I thought, I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, I'll tell you what, Todd. I mean, he's able to do the research because of screen magnifiers and stuff, but the writing part, I said, if you pull the data together, I'll help you with analysis and I'll do the physical writing of the book for you. It's not ghost writing, but it's me writing for him. So when you read these books, they are primarily Todd Wood
research
with my assistance in there, for some of the analysis and such. And I think what people will find interesting about that book is they're for obvious reasons we don't need to go into, because that's not what we're interested in talking about. There are people that have a preconception of what the Lockwood books were about. And actually, when you read the particular books in question, they're not about that particular subject at all. They're about, some other things. But what we focused on in the book was the nature of the prescience of the material, okay,
right.
And how could that have happened? What were the possibilities? And among the possibilities we had to discuss and look at was, okay, did someone move through time, or did someone look through time? And or was it just pure retro analysis, that kind of thing? So really, more of the book is spent on that kind of stuff, I think, than what most people spend on when they talk about the Lockwood books. Most people keep it in the political realm. Our book really just presents what's actually in the Lockwood books that are pertinent, and gets into the weird science aspects of it, elements of it, not so much the political. But somebody brought up the actual real project there, and that's why I asked, when people refer to Project Looking Glass, there was a real U.S. government Project Looking Glass. It has nothing to do with the Bob Lazar stuff. I'll be nice, because you guys know my position on Lazar. I think
it's okay. You can say total bullshit.
Yeah, Lazar. I'm in that camp that for a long time. He's BS.
I will say this about Bob Lazar. He faked his education on his resume. He said that he worked for MIT and that he worked for Caltech. And neither of them had heard of him when Stanton Friedman tried to track all that down. He was in the phone book directory for Los Alamos,
Okay.
but he could have been a janitor for all we know. Now,
Yes.
we know that he owns United Nuclear, and the guy that I was just talking about, Gary Ambrosia, called because he needed to get something from his company, and he ended up being the guy that answered the phone. And he was like, "Oh, you're Bob Lazar. You're the Area 51 guy." And he said, "Yeah, I am. What can I do for you?" He wasn't real interested in talking.
And he seemed to know the business that he's in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sure. If he's been running this business successfully for however many years, he's got to at least know the business that he's in. I think we all know that, that does not, of course, mean that his claims about Area 51 and all that other stuff are true, but
and it doesn't mean they're false either. I mean, like Stanton Friedman, I put them in my gray basket.
Well, I do. I have in the past, and I still do say that one of the possibilities is that he was, used as I can't think of another term right now than guinea pig, but
he was definitely somebody that was easily debunked, because of his association with the what do they call those in polite company?
Oh, you mean the brothel?
Brothel, yeah.
One thing about the brothel thing is I can't recall if it was in one of the counties in Vegas, or the county in Vegas where that's legal.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remember, then he was not engaged in criminal activity. If he was doing computers, or even if he was running one of those ranches, they're legal.
I heard that he was just the guy that set up their security system.
Yeah, see, that was my understanding. And again, those businesses are legal in that particular county.
Yep.
In Nevada. So for him to be painted as a criminal for that. Now, look, whether you agree or disagree with that kind of business being legal, that's a different discussion.
Sure.
But if he was providing a security system for what is a legal business there, then that in itself, that's not some type of criminal activity. But I'm trying to remember. It came up in court over. Was it actually not in the right county? Is that why it came up in court?
I didn't know it came up in court.
Well, yeah, I think that's
all I remember is Stanton Friedman saying, "Well, someone with his association with prostitutes, there's no way that the government would hire a scientist like that on," or blah blah blah. He was pretty, pretty down on Bob Lazar. But I like to give him the benefit of the doubt. His story hasn't changed. He really doesn't like to be interviewed. Jeremy Corbell kind of got him into a corner with George Knapp, and George Knapp had all this stuff, like a big pile full of media, sure. Whether it's, the 1-inch tape from the station or newspapers or what have you.
Yeah.
And I remember he even went on to, what's his name's podcast, the biggest podcast in the world. The guy
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Yeah. He went on the Joe Rogan podcast with Jeremy Corbell, and I don't think George Knapp was there, but apparently he had a really bad headache and he didn't want to be there at all. And after they kind of broke the ice, apparently his headache went away. But
this discussion topic of Lazar, how much is true, how much happened, but he mischaracterized as was maybe planned. This does lead into, okay, of the things he claimed, there was this Project Looking Glass that he talked about that had to do with looking through time. Now, here's what gives me, it's the only thing, in my opinion, Lazar talks about that gives me pause, because I had been told by my mentor years ago that looking through, well, I had asked him in the late 80s, because for myself, in my deep dive again into UFOs, for myself, I had reached that point that many others before me have, where it dawned on me, hey, wait a minute, could these be time travelers? Now, this was around 87, 86 is when I first had the thought. 87, 88 is when I asked my mentor, and he said, you don't need to know that now. We'll talk about that later.
Oh, right.
Well, there's an intriguing answer, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, a few years later, I bring it up again. At this point, I'm with the FBI. And I asked him again. I said, hey, a few years ago, what about, time travel? And he says, again, we're not going to talk about that right now. But I had asked him about caverns, because I was getting into kind of like weird things related to caves and caverns.
Oh,
and,
not taverns, caverns.
Caverns, yeah. Caves, yeah. So
Spelunking.
I had, and this is connected to the time thing, and ultimately connected to the Looking Glass thing. That was when he told me he wouldn't answer my question about time travel, but he told me about this was around 1989, 90. He told me about a larger cavern found beneath the large cavern in Carlsbad, okay, that is known. Okay, like if at the time, if you went to Carlsbad Caverns, you took the tour, there was this big cavern down in the bottom, and they take you in there, and that's the tour.
Right.
And he told me back then, he said, there's actually another cavern bigger than that's been found deeper. Only that's not open to the public yet, because they found some relics in there. Relics of quite a while ago.
Of great spectacle.
Yes.
So to speak.
Yeah, and he told me about the glasses, the spectacles that were found down there. And he said that it was just ultimately discovered through, the lab analysis and such, that these glasses, it was not optical glass in the frames. It was just glass. But what they discovered was a very fine, almost imperceptible wire running horizontally, one through each lens. And somehow, he wouldn't go into the details. Of course not.
But allegedly, this allowed the viewer to see recorded observations of the past.
Of the past, yeah. And so they were able to look into the past. And what's interesting is, I recall distinctly, about a year later, an article announcing the discovery of a new, larger room at Carlsbad Caverns. But this was around 91 or 92. My uncle told me that they had found that room in the late 50s. But it apparently had been secret all this time. And then a year after he tells me the story, it's announced that, oh, gee, we found, another larger one. And the idea being that, they could open it up to the public because they cleared out all the relics and stuff, that they're ostensibly keeping from us. Well, I to bring this thing full circle, this line of questioning with my uncle, and then I'll get back to why the Bob Lazar thing gave me pause. After I got out of the FBI and was in the Air Force, an OSI agent, I was visiting him, and I said, hey, what's the thing about time travel?
I've got clearance now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had clearance then with the FBI, but now it's farther. Yeah, definitely a much higher clearance. And so he says, let's go take a ride. So we get in his car and we ride out in the Alabama countryside. And he says, they've been doing time travel since the turn of the century. Now, remember, this was in the 1990s. So the turn of the century then would have been the 1890s. Wow. And yeah, of course, my jaw dropped like, whoa, what? Yeah. And he said they figured that one out almost 100 years ago. And and he wouldn't go
into more detail.
Into any more detail. But this is why the story about the spectacles, and then what he told me about, people being able to fool around with time travel or what have you, looking back into time for at least a century. When I heard this Project Looking Glass story, I wondered, like, okay, where did Lazar get that? Now, Lazar doesn't say it until late in the 20th century. By then, he could have gotten it from any, fiction, movies, what have you. He could have. Mm-hmm. For that matter, my uncle could have.
Right.
And been yanking my chain. I always like to admit that because, you would say, why would my uncle tell me wild stories like that? Blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe to test my gullibility, maybe to...
Either way, it's still hearsay, right?
Yeah, of course it's hearsay. And that's another beautiful way of sharing some incredible secrets is by when you have someone who's a senior officer to you, which he was. I essentially reported to him through my whole career, no matter who I worked for. To your uncle? Oh, yeah. No matter who I worked for. On one day a week, before the days of cell phones, I would go to a payphone and I would call him and check in with him.
Was he Brigadier General Bosley?
He was Corbin. He was my mom's brother. Oh, okay. And he had been he had started his government career with the Army, had gone into 101st Airborne, was Special Forces, and then was brought into the agency by James Jesus Angleton himself, which I learned in '99 finally. And then spent over 40 years affiliated in the U.S. intel community before he retired. And he had to retire for medical reasons, not because he wanted to. And anyway, I lost where I was going.
Bob Lazar.
Yeah. So, well, there was a mini point in there. So, yeah, the fact that I would report to him.
Right.
So yeah, okay, now I remember. It was that when you're in the spook world, okay, as it was always described to me, it's a parallel career path that you're on. Okay, I did indeed work for multiple agencies. The FBI, the Air Force, involved with another one,
but not at the same time.
No, not at the same time. But at the same time that I was FBI, that I was Air Force, that I was in counterterrorism, I was affiliated with him. And to give you an idea, for instance, when I first got to my new assignment in the Air Force, first assignment in the Air Force, which was Los Angeles, a air base without a flight line. It's a rocket.
Did you say his name was Corbin?
Yeah.
Like Corben?
Corbin.
Oh, okay.
And I called him from payphone on base. And he said, you've been
out there? That one's not monitored at all.
No, of course not. Right. He said, there's a gentleman working in the PX. You've met him already. He works in the back. And he described this guy to a T and knew his name. And I'm like, yeah. And I had no reason to, my meeting of this guy was mundane. He says, okay. He goes, if ever you can't get in touch with me and something's gone down and you need to, he goes, you contact him. He said he's retired Army. We were in the Army together. He says he knows me. And so he was one of the reach out and touch guys. When I was in OTS, I started at
Officer
Medina.
training school.
Yeah. I started at Medina in Texas, and then the Air Force closed down OTS in Texas and moved it back to the War College in Alabama at Maxwell Air Force Base, which was interestingly in the late 50s where my parents initially met. And my uncle lived in Montgomery, Alabama. And, when I was there, I would have meetings with him in his truck in the parking lot of the BX, I could tell you some interesting stories about the mysterious people that would come out of the woodwork during OTS, kind of watching out for me, sheltering me. It was interesting. But I don't want to veer off too much. But what I was getting at is when you're in the spook world, okay, they recruit you. They prepare you. There used to be the word grooming, but now that has a different connotation in our times.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, you know how these perverts groom, but they prepare you and
was unaware of that, I guess.
Yeah. But they prepare you and such. And one of the things they do is, of course, in the vetting process, and I know this because I did this later. I was doing this too, asset handling and stuff. In the vetting process, trust, being able to trust you. Like if I share secret information with you, or what I tell you is secret information, but if I share secret information with you, I've got to know that you're not going to tell anybody who's unauthorized. So one of the ways to test you is to tell you something that doesn't need to be true, but it's called inking the water. It's I tell you a specific thing, and within your sphere of contacts, if that trickles out, then I know where it came from, and I know you've been talking. In other words,
and you can't be trusted.
And you can't be trusted. So there is the possibility that some of the wild things he told me was simply vetting me, because he would say, look, this is stuff you don't talk about with anyone. And I never did until I was out of that world, and years had passed. I kept it very close to vest because I'm not gonna tell my commanders about hey fellas, what do you think about time travel? They're gonna think Special Agent Bosley's nuts. And I will tell you that they give you multiple psychological battery tests through your whole career when you're in this kind of work, and I passed every one with flying colors. So I'm not nuts. But, I totally acknowledge that these wild stories could have been that. The problem, and here's where it gets to that threshold where, folks, I say this, and I have to remind people, I know I'm critical of some things. I'm critical of some stories because I think there's some BS artists out there, but
there's definitely some BS artists.
Yeah, if you're a materialist, at some point, you're not going to want to listen to me or read my books, because I do have some beliefs and suspicions and speculations that, the materialists, you guys know this, your audience knows this, that the materialists just don't appreciate. And, my question to them is, why are you here in this conversation? Because now we're reaching that point where we're going to talk seriously about some things. I think the difference between someone like myself and some of the people I criticize is I don't claim for a fact these things are true and that I know them to be true. I don't claim to be some insider that I'm sharing something that I know. What I'm upfront with you about, this is a speculation, this is a hypothesis, this was the hearsay that I was told, but
this is a fact.
Or this is a fact, that kind of thing. Now that I've caveated, here's where we go into that woo-woo land, is there had been things...
Here's where it gets crazy.
Yeah. There had been some things that date back to December of 1979, which I've talked about in the past, I've written about.
Is this your UFO experience?
No. No UFOs. This was to me much more fascinating than UFOs. My UFO experience, interestingly, was in December, but that was in 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, in December of 79, I had what I call, you know, a strange wake up experience. I woke up one morning and everything was different. And I had
Different in
this,
what way?
I woke up and I was in the house that I knew was my house, but it was like I was seeing it for the first time. And I got up, I walked through the house, I saw my sisters, and I remember thinking, whoa, there's my sisters. Okay. And, I was 16, so they're one of them's the other one, one of them is still high school age like I am, and the older one is getting ready to go into college. And, I go into the kitchen and there's my mom, the 1979 model of my mom,
Mm-hmm.
my dad. And then I remember later that evening just kind of sitting in the living room. I used to joke that if you're a certain age, you remember the comedy Soap.
Oh yeah.
And remember when Bert thought he was invisible? I, I used to joke that it was like I felt like Bert when he thought he was invisible. I'm sitting in the room, with the family in the living room that night, and everybody's watching TV and doing their normal thing, and I felt like I was observing them for the first time, and yet I knew who they were, and so I couldn't explain what the experience was, and
This sounds like the opposite of deja vu,
right.
whatever that would be.
Yeah, and well, I think I know. And for years and years, I couldn't characterize what this was. And then, as I was getting closer to it, and closer to it, I realized too that my uncle's mentorship of me, in my opinion, first overtly began that same year, some months in the spring of that same year when he came to visit us. And I remember that he was focused on me. He would ask me a bunch of questions. He would chat with me. He'd be sitting there watching me.
Now, is this the same person that you referred to as your mentor?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And looking back on it, the way I explain it now is that I think he knew something was going to happen to me, so he was just observing because he knew it was coming. And so then it happens, and just a few years after that, he starts coming around again, and he and I start talking about, he brings up conversations about UFOs, and it's like, oh, you're interested in this stuff, huh? And one thing leads to another, and we start talking about weird stuff, and then comes the day when he tells me about his first weird experience with this entity. And as he's telling me this, I start having this involuntary response. I start trembling, and then I get nauseous.
Okay, hold up.
And
But say again.
yeah,
As he's telling you about his weird experience, you get nauseous?
yeah, I trembling before that. I start trembling involuntarily, and it just something about it just starts making me really nervous, and so
At
much.
some point, are you going to tell us what he told you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Get ready to go to Crazy Town. He told
With
me
Walter
about.
Bosley? No.
Yeah. Now, look, he passed away some years ago, so that's really the only reason I feel, okay about, having talked about a lot of this stuff more than I ever did before he passed away. But he had this experience with the first time he saw what he called the Blue Lady. And the Blue Lady had been appearing to him for years, and she would often appear to him as a harbinger if someone was going to die, or if, as he put it, there was death around.
Right.
But she would also do other things like help him and guide him and such. And as he's telling me about this, I start, having this weird, and he's sitting there watching me as he's talking, and he's talking evenly. Now, sometime later, years later, I wondered, okay, what form of aural, or as AURAL, like sound, audio
Right.
hypnosis with the voice, was he doing to me, possibly? Look, even with my speculations, even with the things I believe, even with the things I'm open to talk about, I always also try to find in there the practical, most likely, most mundane possibility. And this is why I acknowledge the possibility that he was using some type of audio hypnosis with his voice, with the tone, the way he was speaking, the even way, and to spike that reaction in me, and that maybe some of the words he was using, not so much that the blue lady thing was real, but something about the words he was using might have been triggering things embedded in my psyche, in my memory. So it could have been, but it was, believe me, this was very real. This happened, and it happened to me again a few years after that. The first time I went to visit him at it was a house that had been in my aunt's family for years, and when they got married in the 80s, he started refurbishing it and stuff. It had been built in the early 1800s. It's this amazing house that my most significant ghost experience in. But when I first went to visit him there, he was telling me something and was using the same thing, and I started having that nervous, kind of reaction. Now, for a while, the way I can interpret that is, was he telling me something that I knew to be true? And, because what he was telling me was pretty wild stuff. He
Sure.
told me, this was in 86, he told me that second time, he said, these things you call monsters, they're very real. And someday I'll take you to a place where you can see them. Now, that's some
Enigmatic shit.
Yeah, some cool shit that, I'm a young guy out of college, an impressionable, imaginative mind. And I'll tell you, if this was all just vetting and handling, to be able to work me as a field agent, the guy was a master at it, because that's what you do. You one of the things you do is you reach into themes that interest your target person, okay, your individual. And he was hitting all the things that he knew would intrigue the hell out of me, right? So I acknowledge that it could have been a complete psycho-emotional manipulation. If it weren't, I would land there. If it weren't for the fact that experience I had in December of 1979 was too damned real. And some of the other experiences I was having with precognitive dreams were just too real. The psychic experiences, just the weird, it was just too real. And for it to be just a manipulation from him, because a lot of this was going on before his mentoring, really began. I think it kicked off when he visited us in 79, but it really did not overtly begin until a few years after that. So naturally, when we get to the 90s and I'm getting curious about time and time travel and time phenomena and stuff, it intrigues me even more when he says, you're not ready to know that yet.
Right.
Or I can't tell you about that yet. But then he says something in the late 90s. And I had asked him, I'd finally asked him, what happened to me in 79? And he said, I can't tell you that right now.
But he knew it happened.
Yeah. He says, but you are going to figure it out. Okay. And, over the years, I would share it with some people. And naturally, I had one person that said, oh, you're a walk-in.
Right.
Okay. The walk-in concept intrigued me. And part of that might be true. And we're going to get into that. Then, of course, the inevitable, oh, you were abducted. You've been an abducted. I'm like, oh, God, why always the ET? It just, no. This had nothing to do with that. So ultimately, I, as I thought about this and I started having more and more experiences, by the time we get to a couple of years before he passed, by this time I've known Seshari for a number of years. And he and I have noticed something about in our dive into the telluric current stuff, particularly relative to Empire of the Wheel research. By the time we get to 2014, he and I have been start having some pretty deep, serious conversations about time and hypothetical, conversations about hypothetically traveling through time. How could it be done? What, and what are the methods? This, that, and so forth. And Seshari wrote me a series of letters, 3 letters. I've mentioned this before elsewhere. And in these letters, he goes into detail on a theory of his of how time relative to the phenomena of it being a place, dimension, and moving through it works, and how one might possibly create a time machine. And in that discussion, we think we discovered that the author Richard Matheson discovered something, because both the book Somewhere in Time, which started out, was originally published as Bid Time Return, and the film, which he wrote the screenplay for, they have huge symbolism in them. And what I had always loved that film, I loved the book.
Oh yeah.
Book
and by the way, Walter, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Richard Matheson is one of my personal literary heroes.
Oh, the guy was, look at all the stuff he did that in our, particularly in our youth, was just so incredible. But the here's what's interesting is I had read the book years before, but when I picked it up again, it was my jaw dropped, because there's certain synchronicities in the book to Empire of the Wheel. For instance, the date, the month and date, not the same year, but the day of the month that Richard Collier makes his leap back into time successfully, is the day that Cora Stanton's body was found dead in San Bernardino. Now, Cora Stanton was found in 1915, and in the book this happens in 1893, but it's the 19th of November. And in the book it happens in San Diego, which, of course, I was born in San Diego. Seshari, on one of the big maps that he's made for me, there is a major spiral of telluric energy. Current. Yeah, coming out of Cabrillo Point, where the Cabrillo National Monument is, and it winds around and it goes right through Coronado Island, and which is where the book takes place, Somewhere in Time. And anyway, Sesh ended up doing this in-depth analysis of all the data points I had found, that I had found in reading the book and stuff. He took it further, and it was just mind-blowing. The stuff that we were finding, and again, I'll get into it more, but we became convinced, and still are, that Richard Matheson figured something out about.
I'll tell you what, he was a very sharp guy. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, I asked his son, RC, Richard Christian Matheson, who he himself is an award-winning, screenwriter and author, and has been for years. I asked him, I said, "Hey, did your dad ever tell you about or talk about the Egyptian symbolism in Somewhere in Time?" And he said, "No." Okay, so I have no way of knowing if that's the truth. Maybe he did, for all I know, and he said, "Don't ever tell anyone about this.
Mm-hmm.
If they find it, fine, but it's there big time. And this, I want to talk to Sesh about maybe letting me publish these letters within the context.
That would be really cool.
Because let me tell you something, it would be one hell of a book on time travel. But I get into it a little bit. I'm going to get into a discussion, but when things were popping up with Todd's research on the Lockwood thing, Jack Finney, another great author of the era, popped up. And so then I looked at him and I looked at Matheson's work. And what people may not realize is the two greatest time travel novels of the modern era are Time and Again by Jack Finney and Somewhere in Time by Richard Matheson. And they were published 5 years apart. And as the Lockwood book states, I think Matheson learned some stuff from Finney, because I think Finney, and Todd agrees with this, we both think Finney figured something out or knew something that was going around about time travel. And in this mysterious, enigmatic individual, Charles Howard Johnson, who was the illustrator of the Lockwood books in question, we may have found, at the very least, someone that Jack Finney himself, even if it was just fanciful, but I think it's possible that Johnson was a model for a couple of Finney protagonists. And by extension, perhaps, Richard Collier is also, a model or modeled on this Johnson guy. And the form, and we'll get into this also, it speaks to a particular form and method of time travel. Anyway, in this discussion, in these letters, Sesh did these diagrams and such, and I had this extraordinary experience one night where, to keep it simple, I won't specify what the song is, but I was going to shopping to Trader Joe's, I think, and a song came on the radio, and it's a song that's been around since the 80s, and I like it, but for some reason it just struck me that night. And I had a strange dream.
Was it a Cyndi Lauper song by any chance?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It was a Pretender song. It's the Pretender. I'll say what the song is. Don't Get Me Wrong.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so I'm listening to this song, and for some reason, it just gives me this giddy feeling. I had this weird dream, and I had suspicions about the dream, that there was a message in the dream, and something about hearing the song. I immediately knew, oh crap, I'm right about this. I'm right about my suspicions about the dream. And
because of the synchronicity there?
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, what I have to do now is go back and look at the lyrics to the song and watch the video. And when I did, that just blew my mind, because in the letter, Sesh, he's showing this schematic of how cycles of time work within the context he was using. And I don't have the letter right in front of me. It's on another shelf right over there. But the important thing is that the symbol that he showed, it was a circle with a triangle inside. And, within the context he was showing, he was explaining how it moves and what it means. And so then I get home and I open up the video, and my jaw drops, because there are three in Sesh's letter. There are three of these circles with the triangles. 3. Okay. Now remember, 3 is also the main number of Hecate, the triple goddess. And the dream I had involved Hecate, but she appeared to me as twins. Or at the time, what I saw were 2 ladies who look like twins. Okay. So then the next day I'm at Trader Joe's, and I have this thing with the song, and I go home and I'm watching the video, and there in the video, there is the sequence where Chrissy Hind is supposed to meet her contact. And remember, she's a spy in the video. But think about the career I was in. So she's an intelligence agent in the video. She pulls up to a nightclub, okay? And this happens in 3 shots. The first shot is a medium shot of the entrance to the nightclub. You see the car pull into view. She's looking down on her seat at something on the seat, but you see beyond her the neon sign for the club. And all it is a circle with a triangle. Boom. Then cut to the next shot, and on the seat next to her is a personal note that her character had made, and drawn on it was a circle with a triangle inside. Boom, that's 2. And then it cuts to the third shot, and it's across the hood at her windshield as she's getting out, and the parking attendant is putting a card under her windshield wiper, and the card simply has a circle with a triangle. Boom, boom, boom. 3 circles, just like in the
law of
letter.
threes.
Yeah, and 3, and this is happening, and then I'm listening to the lyrics, and at one point she says in the song, "Don't get me wrong, if I split like light refracted, if I split like light refracted, perhaps there's more of me, maybe 2 of me." And then it hit me, the dream the night before, that those were not twins, that was her split or refracted into 2. Hearing this song that night, I interpreted it in the heat of the moment, as I am now, as a message, a communication from Hecate.
Right. Hecate is kind of your spirit animal, huh?
She split like light refracted, because what it was, I'm standing in a building, a turn of the century, 19th into 20th century library, which is very much like the Smiley Library in Redlands. And there's this line of people dressed in very nice but old-timey clothes, and they're walking past me. I'm kind of standing out of their way. They're walking past me, making a turn. I'm at the corner of this corridor, and they're not noticing me. And the only person who notices me, the only people who notice me, are these 2 older, graceful-looking ladies. And as they walk past me, they look at me, and one of them nods, and they move on. And they're the only 2 that notice me. And that was the dream I had. And then suddenly I understood the dream, that I was standing watching the stream of time and the people flow past me. And Hecate was acknowledging, yeah, you get it now. Yeah.
Nice.
That's exactly what's going on here. And yes, I see you. And so then the next night I have this experience with the song, "Don't Get Me Wrong, if I split like light refracted." And people are saying, "Oh, Walter, always with the Hecate." Well, part of what I figured out is something that I don't like to spill the beans on, because I like people to figure it out on their own. I will say this.
And we, after all, we want to sell some books.
Well, that's...
it's a side benefit of being on Into the Fringe.
Yeah. But that's not the reason I don't say what I don't say about this. I really...
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's simple as hell when you figure it out, but I am depicting it visually.
Oh, I see. You're wanting to allow them the joy of discovery.
Yeah, well, because there is this thing called the admonition of Isis, the Egyptian goddess, who, by the way, is associated with Hecate. Okay?
Sure.
She's essentially an aspect of Hecate, because Hecate is much older than ancient Egypt and their pantheon. And
where does Hecate make her first appearance?
The earliest that scholars will tell you is somewhere in the Black Sea region. Like she's possibly a Scythian.
Not Babylonian?
Nah. Older. She's a chthonic goddess. She's among the chthonic gods and goddesses, which are so old that their origins are murky.
Right.
But anyway, one of the things that there is this thing called the admonition of Isis. Now, remember, Isis is the veiled goddess. Well, when she lifts her veil to show you her true nature, you are to tell no one.
Right.
You know, in other words, you're not supposed to ruin the secret for others, because I could tell you, but it won't have the same impact as you figuring it out for yourself. You won't know it so deeply to be true. So ultimately, when I realized, oh my God, it has been so simple this whole time, and I get now what she is. And I'm depicting this. Remember, it's a silent film, So this idea that I'm talking about, this conclusion that I came to about her, is in the film. And if you figure it out, great. But you figured it out for yourself based on things that that I'm not spilling any beans on. It's symbolism that is associated with her. But when you do figure it out, you'll go, oh my God, that was so easy. Why didn't I figure it out before? That's how profound it is. And it doesn't originate with me. I'm saying I've figured out something that many, many, many others, I'm sure, have figured it out before. But anyway, all this was happening, and you come away. Now, the materialists would say, "Oh yeah, it's called neurosis or psychosis, or
coincidence, or
go to hell." You're in the wrong place if you're listening to this conversation and these things bother you.
Some people just believe total bullshit.
Yes, they do, and some people also believe that someone like myself calling bullshit and throwing the bullshit flag on stuff, they think, well, that makes you a hypocrite. No, it doesn't, because pay attention to what I throw the flag on and why. I always say that I have no problem with the concepts of the wild and a lot of the things in the woo. What I question are certain individual claims and stories and stuff that I'm sorry don't hold up. And anyway, all this was going on during this period, and one of the things involved with the discussion with Sechery on telluric current had to do with the numerology of what's called karmic frequencies and such, and the transposition of numbers was popping up, and that was a thing, an element, a theme of the whole observation during those 7+ years of Empire of the Wheel investigation. And I started putting it together, and I thought, let me ask you this. I intend to totally say what I was going to say, but should we discuss Finney and Matheson first, and then I'll come back to this?
I think that might be a better plan.
Yeah. So I think I figured something out, but let's pause my story there and return to because
long as we're going to take a pause,
it actually what am I trying to say? It actually reinforces what I'm going to say about my suspicion.
I'm going to have to do a new pour up.
Okay.
And you can see my Mars Attacks.
Oh, nice.
There.
Oh, I like that.
So another one of these strawberry lime sparkling watermelon.
Oh, good for you.
Water. I'll tell you what, the CBD oil really does help with chronic pain.
I was going to ask you about, you said that the drink you're using is a CBD drink?
Yeah.
I got to try that.
It really works.
Now let me ask you this, though. The edibles they wipe me out if I take too big of a piece.
Yeah.
Now, does that have the effect of wiping you out, or
it depends?
Okay.
You live in California, where
so our stuff is stronger,
where weed is legal. Yeah. So if you get edibles, you have to be careful that they're just CBD.
Oh no, I'm using THC edibles, so I admit
those will wipe you out.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. And I know some people say,
not that I would know. Being in Kansas,
it's a violation of federal law. It's blah, blah, blah. It's like, you know what? I never did that shit until I was diagnosed with cancer. And
that's
Uncle
right.
Sam, if they don't like me doing it, they can kiss my ass.
Well, it's legal in California, so
it's well, but still, the feds like to have their panties in a bunch over it. So if any of my former bosses or agencies wanted to give me disdain, I would quote Anthony Hopkins in Legends of the Fall, and say, "Screw the government," That's where I stand on that. But it did help my arthritis tremendously.
Yeah, I have rheumatoid arthritis as well.
You know what?
And it really does help.
It looks like I might have that myself. I got a panel done today, and my rheumatoid, the test for the rheumatoid, came back high.
Yeah.
So
I've had rheumatoid arthritis since I was 17 because I'd been already drumming punk rock hardcore for 2 years by then.
Yeah.
My body is shot through with arthritis.
Yeah, my mentor uncle had rheumatoid arthritis, so. And my dad had gout. I don't have gout, but...
And as fascinating as this all is, we should probably get back to the subject.
Let's get back to time travel.
Yeah.
a couple old guys talking about their aches and pains. You know, wait till the rest of you get there. You'll get here. You'll see. So,
Canadian Spider-Man says they can kiss our asses. They need to smoke a fatty and sit the hell down.
Look, when I was a federal agent, I learned quickly. It's like I don't want to be involved in the so-called drug war or not, because I want to be involved with a mission that's crystal clear. And believe it or not, counterintelligence in the spy world and stuff is more crystal clear than drug investigations. As murky as the spook world is, it's I'll put it to you this way. Just like in the movies and stuff, in real life, you have cops that hate feds because they've experienced feds that act like a-holes. But I'll tell you, when you're the counterintelligence guy in real life, nobody doesn't like the counterintelligence guy. You go into a city and you say, oh, yeah, I'm the Fed, but I'm going after spies. Every cop I ever met thought that was cool, and they were willing to help, because you weren't coming in there to take their bailiwick. Because they didn't do spy stuff. So, and that's what I liked about it. It was clear cut, blah, blah, blah. So that's a great tiki. So
I actually considered when we were going to do our pour up, our tiki off, as it were, leading with the Mars attacks and then going to the Gorn. But I thought Gorn versus Gorn is, we can't possibly make a decision based on Gorn versus Gorn, but Mars Attacks guy, he's got the jetpack and everything.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And I gotta tell you, Walter, you actually turned me on to the tikis.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, once I saw that you had the Gorn, I was like, I've got to get one of those. And then I was like, oh, they're all sold out. So...
Now, is this from Geeky Tiki's also? It looks like it. Yeah. Now,
and they're selling like hotcakes.
I found another guy I'm going to turn you on to at the Comic Fest in San Diego that I went to a while back, and I'm going to dig out his name and contact.
And this is the guy that you waited all weekend until Sunday before you bought.
No, this is a different guy.
I
waited all weekend until Sunday before I bought the creature model from another vendor. Yeah. And, I figured so many people like yourself were generous in sending me these amazing models that at least one of these darn things I had to buy myself. I had to spring money out of my own pocket to do, just to be fair. So anyway, getting back to Jack Finney and Richard Matheson, we do go into this in the Lockwood book, but, the Ingersoll Lockwood books are known today for apparently predicting the public rise, specifically the period of the presidency of Donald Trump. And there are political discussion endeth.
Connotations,
Yeah. I'm just stating the historical fact of why the Lockwood books emerge publicly.
And after all, it is Todd Wood's research, not yours necessarily.
It's Todd really pointing out some amazing things. But what he pointed out was, he had asked me, he goes, have you read the Lockwood book? And I'm like, no, I've heard about it, of course, the little Barron Trump story about the kid who, named Barron Trump. And that, of course, is the name of the president's son. And when I
I must have gotten them conflated.
What?
Who's the other Baron Trump?
The little boy character in the Lockwood fantasy books, Baron Trump, The Adventures of Baron Trump, and Baron Trump Go the Underground Journey of, and it's spelled with one R because it's a title in the books, but of course I believe Baron Trump, the son of the president, is 2 R's. It's a proper name. And so, but here's the thing that Todd pointed out. He goes, actually, the political book that's pertinent by Lockwood has nothing to do with Trump. And when you read it, 1900 of the Last President, you learn that. It's like, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. This has to do with other people and things that are actually happening, so much so that that's what prompted the approach that Todd and I did in this particular book was, okay, how was this guy able to predict things that are actually happening since, particularly since 2020, okay? Since 2020, like starting in 2021, how was he able to predict this in a book written in 1896 or something?
Right.
And also, what's the weird deal with, the name of the kid and the whole Trump thing? And there are synchronicities, little points of curious contact between, the real Trump we know and the character in the books, but in a very general way. And then there's the illustrations. And one in particular looks just so remarkably exactly like President Trump's son did at the time he was running and first became president, at the age that Baron Trump was at the time his dad was running and became president. In fact, there's a couple of pictures where even his head is tilted the same way, and as in this illustration, and they look identical. And these illustrations were done, confirmed to have been done. Because my first thought was, okay, all right, this whole Trump book,
this whole thing's a hoax.
Yeah, this has got to be. Okay, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum has nothing to do with, okay, there's something funny business going on here. So when I looked into it, I learned, no, these books really were published back then. And these illustrations were done back then. So then the next obvious thing to do was to look at the illustrator.
And we're talking 1890, right?
Yeah. 1890s, 96. So then you look at the illustrator. It's like, okay, the illustrator, how did the illustrator know what this little kid born 100 years later was going to look like? So who's the illustrator? Oh, Charles Howard Johnson. So now
things are starting to come piece together.
So the minute I look into Charles Howard Johnson, I'm like, now remember, I've already been through the Empire of the Wheel years. I've already been through a lifetime of weirdness. By the time I got to this point where I'm looking at Charles Howard Johnson, I'm like, oh hell no! I'm like Richard Dreyfuss in Jaws when Hooper first appears at the autopsy and he gets frustrated, he gets aggravated, and he goes, "This was no boating accident," and he knows it was a shark attack. Well, I'm looking at the Charles Howard Johnson thing, and I'm like, this was no damn coincidence. This guy knew something. This guy, and I'm going to go there. This guy, at the very least, saw through time. Now, let's step back a moment. When you look at what Lockwood wrote, you could argue, okay, number one, it could have been luck. He just, politics is politics, right? And you could almost predict some things that are going to happen 100 years later by what's happening today, right? If you put certain elements together, certain things are going to happen, blah, 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 by the nature of politics and economy and social, this, that, and the other. So you could argue
this has all happened before, and it will all happen again.
Yeah, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right?
Right.
So you could argue that Lockwood lucky roll of the dice, okay, and therefore gets his finally gets his immortality as a writer, right? Because he rolled the dice, and 100 years, more than 100 years after he writes this thing, it comes true. So you could argue that, but then again, you look at the details of the stuff Lockwood's writing, and you come away going, okay, now there are specifics in there that
it's a little too spot on.
But we're still talking about a textual presentation. Okay. What put me over with really being convinced there was something extraordinary going on here was when you jump over to those illustrations and you see the Charles Howard Johnson illustration from the 1890s, and that little kid looks just like the son of a man who would become president at the time that his father becomes president. And you look at that and you're like, oh, how in the hell? How did he? So then you look at this guy's life and you go, oh my God. The only things we know about this man's origin before he arrives in New York City, okay, is what he's told people. No, there's no evidence out there for it. And then when he dies, we're told, oh, he died at home, which that happens these days. People do hospice at home, right? But particularly back then. But where's the body? I haven't yet found where Charles Howard Johnson was buried. And then you look at certain specifics of his life and you go, wait a minute, there's some similarities here to Richard Collier of Matheson's book. And there's similarities to Cy in the Finney book, time and again. And then you think, this guy could have been the model for both Finney's character and then Matheson's character. At the very least, a model for literary characters. And then that goes into, what the hell did Finney and Matheson think about Johnson? Did they think the same thing that I'm suspecting, that he, at the very least, he had some way of looking through time? And then, of course, this is after Seshary and I have already done our analysis of Richard Matheson, and we suspect that he knew something. You add that into the mix, and the math is just adding up. Crazy math, to be sure.
Right.
You could argue, but the math is adding up. Okay.
Son.
What's that?
The Matheson.
Oh, interesting.
Sorry.
Play on words. So, you get it. You start jumping into this, and there's just wheels fall into place. And of course, I always say, could be wrong about this.
Sure.
But we're discussing it. And
it is, after all, speculation.
Yeah, it is speculation. It's hypothesis.
But it's informed.
And so what that does is that leads into, okay, what could Charles Howard Johnson have been the one who taught Lockwood how to look through time? Could Charles Howard Johnson have been the one who knew these secrets about time and space and place? And if so, how did he do it? So then how do we pursue that question? Well, then therefore, if Charles Howard Johnson really did figure this stuff out, and if he really was the model for Jack Finney's character and for Matheson's character, then you say, okay, how did these characters do it? And oh boy, there's one big fat thing that the Finney and the Matheson characters have in common. And you know what that is? They travel through time without the assistance of any machinery. They do it with the power of the mind. And then you look at Finney and you realize he comes out with his book. Okay, he had written short stories before on time travel. He'd been fascinated with this subject since, for 20 years before he came out with Time and Again. And what's interesting is not
to be confused with Time After Time.
Right,
which
not
was a
time after
great
time.
fucking movie.
Oh yeah.
David Warner and Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah. And um, so here's what's interesting. You read time and again, and the character Psy has been recruited, get this, by a secret U.S. Army group, which is
That's a
trying
little
to
too close to home.
it gets better. Trying to teach people to use their psychic ability to move through time, to jump back in time. Back
So
and
are
forth
we
in
talking
time.
like remote viewing?
Exactly. And
Okay.
that was the connection I made. It was, wait a minute, in remote viewing, we're told they were able to look across space and time. And here's the thing. There is evidence and reason to believe that they were already messing with this stuff at the time that Finney was working on and writing and published his novel. And it's essentially, when you read the description of how the program works in the novel, it sounds like Project Grill Flame and Stargate, the way the Army thing was described.
Right.
A little more detail, a little more fanciful, but he uses the power of his mind. Okay. Basically, they have these cubicles in this storage facility, and each cubicle is decorated to the period of the target year and place, right? And the traveler dresses like someone from that era and is surrounded by all the accoutrements of the era that they're targeting to. And what they do is they live in that little apartment block thing, and the idea is until it happens. And it actually happens for Psy. I think he's the first, and he's not the first one, but in the story, it works for him. He makes the jump back to 1880s New York, blah blah blah, so forth. Very suspiciously resonant with Charles Howard Johnson's life, things we know about his life, but it's the power of the mind. And then, of course, 5 years later, Richard Matheson comes out with the novel Bid Time Return, which is now known as Somewhere in Time. And Richard Collier, his main character, goes back in time using mental power, basically desire and will. Now, I've talked about this as part of the discussion of the letters between Sesh and I, and discussions we've had that parts aren't in the letters. But basically, if it can be done, hypothetically, the traveler surrounds him or herself with it just saturates with everything to the target time, okay, the target period, a target date. And we're talking clothes, everything, the way Richard Collier does it in the movie Somewhere in Time, the way Psy does it in Time and Again. And there has to be desire. What the desire does is it's the anchor. It's what I call a desire anchor. And it's basically, it's the desire that's attaching you to something in the past, we'll say, in this particular case. And that's what's going to psycho-emotionally anchor you to that past that you're trying to get to. And if you generate enough of the willpower and you're surrounded by enough of the saturation, your will, using that desire, will pull you into the past. And we see that in Somewhere in Time, that the desire anchor for him is he's fallen in love with Elise McKenna, the actress, right? That he sees if you watch the movie, he sees her in the Hall of History. It's similar in the book. It's just that he's at the Hotel Del. And he goes to the Hall of History and he sees, the actress, such and so forth. And here's what's interesting. I'm looking at Charles Howard Johnson, and you find out that when he's living in New York, he falls in love with and marries an actress. And I'm thinking, okay, that's even more reason to think that this guy was the model for at least the character in the Matheson book. because there's one more resonance.
Walter Ari in the chat mentions that's how John Carter gets to Mars, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, through mental power. Yeah, through will and desire. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, in Burroughs and the John Carter stories, we see the ability to move across space using this will, and it's the same kind of thing. So of course, Matheson and Finney being kids and growing up with Burroughs, they probably got the idea of the desire, but then again, did they? Where did Burroughs get it? I mean, you could talk about where did Burroughs get this idea for
Sure.
I mean, you could go in that
That's
direction.
a legitimate question.
Yeah. So at the very least, I come away going, okay, just like with the remote viewing program and its claims, at the very least, what if Johnson was able to mentally, through what we today call remote viewing, was able to look into the future? And what if it was a matter of, so you would say, then why not? And I hope I'm not jumping around and being confusing. I'm
not at all.
Stream
No,
thought consciousness is making sense. So like Todd and I ask ourselves, okay, if they looked into the future, how come the books are about a kid on this fantastic adventure, and how come it's not more specific about what was going on with politics and stuff specifically? Well, our conclusion to that was, our suggestion to that was, what if you're only able to do it in glimpses? So, in Lockwood's case, what if Johnson taught him this method and Lockwood was only able to catch glimpses of what he wrote about?
Right.
And then fashioned into the stories that he fashioned into. I would say that 1900 or The Last President is the more pure look that he got into the future. I would say it was glimpses that led him to write the Baron Trump stories. But the Baron Trump material or suggestion, some of that might have come from Johnson, because Johnson illustrated it, and Johnson himself is the one who did the illustration of the kid that looks so much like the real young Baron Trump that we know today. So you have this guy who he was well respected. If you look up Charles Howard Johnson, you'll see his illustrations. At the time, he was a successful magazine and book illustrator. And we go into a thing in the book about Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, that there's some mystery there as to what Longfellow might have known about this stuff, as well as Nicholas Poussin. And Charles Howard Johnson had done a very successful and popular illustrated edition of Evangeline by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and he had done an illustrated version of, oh my gosh, I'm doing a brain dump. It's The Lady in the Tower Who Only Sees the World Through a Cracked Mirror. And Johnson did an illustrated edition of that. And
it's mentioned in this book.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's talked about in the long.
I remember that.
And it in a very interesting context. Because
people think on Into the Fringe, people think I don't read their books. I do read their books.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know that. I know that because you know too much detail from the book to have not read it. So I had already had suspicions and been intrigued regarding, at the very least, possibly looking into time. And with the stuff my uncle was telling me, and the stuff with the glasses that he told me, the spectacles that were found, and he said they've been doing this since the turn of the century. And here we have Charles Howard Johnson, who at the turn of that century my uncle was referring to, illustrates these books. So, Johnson, essentially, we're told he died in his home. We don't know where he was buried. On the wildest end of the spectrum was Charles Howard Johnson. Was he a man who indeed traveled from our times back in time? Was he quite literally the model for the character Cy in Jack Finney's novel? So again, what the hell did Jack Finney know? What did Richard Matheson know? They figured something out about, at the very least, looking through time, if not time travel itself, which then brought me back to my own experience in December of 79 when I was 16. I wake up, and now what I want you to do is consider, from the perspective of time travel, the experience I described. I wake up, I look at the house, I recognize it, but it just seems more dimensional. I'm walking through and I'm like, oh, there's my sisters. Now, I'm seeing my sisters. I know they're my sisters, but there was something about seeing them that kind of didn't startle me, but I was amazed, I guess you'd say, or something. And then seeing my mom and then seeing my dad. Now, what if I had willed myself at an older time in my life back into a younger point in my life? And when I woke up that morning, that was the older me arriving in the younger me. And as I'm seeing my sisters, I'm seeing them as teenagers again. And that was the part that was like, whoa, look at Beth and Tammy and look how young they are. And then seeing my mom, it's like, oh my gosh, there's my mom. Look how young my dad's alive again. What the hell? This is wild. And then all the times I was experiencing deja vu and all the other weird stuff, and my uncle seeming to know that something was going to happen to me, that something was coming. He had told me in 86, that was about remote viewing. That was the first time I'd heard about remote viewing. He told me one day I would learn how to do it. I had then years later asked him, hey, what about time travel? And he didn't want to talk about it with me. What about time travel? And he would tell me a little bit, but what happened to me in December? I'm not going to tell you that. And then he says, you're going to figure it out someday. And here was the key words. It says, you're going to figure out someday what you did.
Oh.
And it was what I did. And then I remembered what I had learned about transposition during all the karmic frequency investigation and study and discovery that Seshari and I were discovering during Empire of the Wheel. And I thought, oh my God, what if I was at 61 years old, I jumped back into my 16-year-old self, 61 to 16. That's a transposition.
Wait, how would you know what happened when you were 61 years old?
What?
Did you jump forward?
No. I'm asking, what if, my question then was, because I'm not even 61 yet. My question is,
that's what's confusing me, because I know you're not 61 yet.
No, remember what I said. My uncle said that someday I would figure out what I did. Okay? And I'm getting, and remember, I'm asking the question, what if at 61 years old, I consciously willed myself back in time in my own personal life?
Oh.
Okay? So that implies right there that by the time I'm 61, I will know what it is I need to know to do that. And as I'm getting closer and closer, I'm learning more and more how to do that. Now, here's the thing. I talked with Seth. Well, the first thing I did was, and you can take this for what it's worth. A lot of things I say people can take for what it's worth, and it could be nothing. I could be reading it wrong. Whatever. I had learned years before, my uncle had said, someday you'll ask me how to ask certain questions. You'll learn how to ask me certain questions that I can answer them more directly when you figure out. And what he meant was you'll find a way to indirectly ask me in a way that I'll know what you're talking about without you saying what you're talking about.
Right.
So when I first hit on this, like, oh my God, this 61 to 16 thing, I asked him, am I right about 61 to 16? And he said, yeah. He said, yes.
I just figured out that the transposition of the numerology.
Yeah. He said yes. And that was our last communication before he
really?
died. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I thought, oh my God. Okay.
Because that gives it like an extra meaning, you know.
Yes. Yeah. So, and he had always said I would figure out what it is I did. So I thought, okay. So then, as I was talking with Seshari about this, we were analyzing it. Did I do this? Sesh says, yeah, of course you did this. This makes sense. I'm like, okay. So sometime between now, this was back in 20, whatever it was, I think 16 when my 2016, interesting, 2016, that number again, when my uncle passed away. And we were talking about, okay, but wait a minute. There's the issue of if I jump back using the powers of the mind when I'm 61, my consciousness can only, this is the way I was thinking, can only be in that place. And in the intervening years, what's going on with my body? Am I like John Carter laying there in a coma somewhere in a room or a
Civil
tomb or
War
something?
hospital? Yeah.
Well, then that's when what I discovered about Hecate came in. And I realized, no. I get it now. I get it. And here's what I'm getting to. Here's what I think. Here's my personal hypothesis on how we can travel through time and primarily back into our own personal lifeline. And it's when we die.
Right.
And I think what it was is when I did it, I died at 61 years old the last time. And at the point of death, I chose to jump back into my own life to relive a big portion of it. And because I was 61, I was able to jump into my 16-year-old body. Now, the problem with that is, what if you're
okay, so you were your own walk-in?
Yes.
Wow.
I was my own walk-in, and that explains
you just
why.
Blew my mind.
There's my sisters young again. There's my mom young. There's my dad alive.
Okay.
Then
this explains the experience that you described at the beginning.
Yeah, when my son happened, I just knew. I knew in that weird psychic way, because I wasn't married. He wasn't planned, but I just knew that, okay, this is right. It's like I knew this was supposed to happen. And there's all sorts of other things, that going on around through my life, but but this is the best explanation for that experience in December of 79. And my uncle had told me, he goes, one day you're going to figure out what you did. And that's what I think I did. But that's the catch. I think we're able to do this at the point of death, and it has to do with Hecate. It has to do with Hecate.
And this coincided with your uncle's death.
Well, my uncle, I was figuring this out shortly before he passed away.
And the last communication that you had
to do with this.
Yeah. Wow. Wowie. Wow.
Yeah. And now here's the thing. Then I'm thinking, shit, I don't want to die at 61.
Right.
I got plans.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's when and here's the thing. At the time that I thought that, I didn't know a couple years later, I was going to be diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So then I thought, oh boy, maybe I did or do die at 61. But here's the thing. Seshari worked out a karmic frequency for the book of his that I published that started our friendship and our, association, Wonder of the Worlds, the novel that I sent you. And
very hush hush.
The karmic frequency that he worked out ends in 2044. And when he told me that some years back.
Wow. That's serendipitous for me.
Okay.
Because when I was in a band called 2 Mile Death Plunge, we had a song called Phillips 66,
Okay.
and the lyrics of the song talk about what you're going to do in 2044 when basically all the oil runs out.
We're going to have a talk, because now that there's a synchronicity to you. Now, I just want to say this. Cardinal Sin's helping me with something relative to Wonder of the Worlds, bringing Wonder of the Worlds back out for re-release. And the fact that I asked him to do that and he agreed to do that before we just right now discovered the 2044 connection, that's what we call a synchronicity, folks, a legitimate synchronicity in this. And when I tell Sesh about this, it's going to blow his mind.
Yeah.
Especially
if you play him the song.
Yeah. That'd
be
right there.
Walter, that'd be the best way to do it, is just say, just listen to this song.
Yeah. And then tell him.
And don't tell him.
Yeah. But at the time, see, now I'm thinking otherwise, but at the time I said, well, Sesh, I turned 81 that year. It's conceivable that I could die that year, and what you've done is predicted the year of my death. And he was like, oh, don't say that. He goes, I try to avoid those kinds of things. So I'm like, well, if it's 81, it's 81. And, it is when it is.
Right.
But
now we got to think back to what you were doing in 1981.
Graduating high school.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so that's my. I think that Charles Howard Johnson, at the very least, was able to look across time. What does this imply also? That we don't have time, and I don't have the energy to get into it right now, but that opens up the discussion to two routes. Is either the future had already happened, okay, by the time Johnson and by the time our life started, this future has already happened, or the nature of time and space itself is such that everything is happening at once, and
yeah,
you can
we just perceive it as
perceive it as down the line future,
but
right?
I think at this point, physics has determined that time is sort of an illusion. Everything happens at once, and we have to experience it sequentially because of the consciousness that we have.
Well, and also the purpose of our lives.
Yeah.
The purpose of why we live a life requires this linear sequence by sequence, because of the things as beings we're supposed to learn and do. And look, I've been into the discussion, again, I don't have the energy to get into it right now, but I've already had the discussion with people where they say, well, then if it's already happened or it's happening all at once, how can there be free will? It's like, trust me, there is still free will in all of this. It still fits. Okay, we're part of it, but our actions and stuff can be independent of. It's a whole other discussion, and it does, it has its own logic. But I think Charles Howard Johnson. Todd and I have discussed, and that's why we go there in the book, is we agree that Lockwood, at the very least, probably saw through time. And that resulted in his 1900 of the Last President novella. Johnson, on the other hand, might have done the thing I did, because if you recall, his body, he disappears after he dies.
And where's the grave?
Yeah, where the hell is the grave? And even if we knew where his grave was, that doesn't change. That just adds to the mystery. What that does, I'm sorry, but where is the grave? That adds the element.
It's another book for Walter Bosley to write.
Yeah, but that adds the element of, my God, is this guy moving through time in the traditional literary sense that we're talking about? Is there no grave because he did a John Carter across time? You see why when I say this is so much more interesting to me than UFOs and ET? Because, okay, there's other planets with intelligent life and they have
Big
civilization.
deal. There's a universe full of
Okay.
it, you know.
My God, how does that obsessively fascinate people the way it does? Oh, there's people on other worlds.
Right.
I
No
mean,
shit.
no fucking shit. There's fish in the bottom of the sea that you've never. It's like, really? This boggles your mind more than, you know. But I know, and then I'm gonna get a bunch of people saying, "Why do you mock people?" Which is, you know,
Because mocking serves a very important function.
yes, it does. It can be a wake up call, a snap out of it kind of thing
Yeah.
with people. You know, it's, and we live in times where, not to go too far into that, but just the hypersensitivity in our society, people need to snap the hell out of it and stop being the friggin' hypersensitive panty wastes that they have become, because we've got tougher times ahead of us.
They must.
These,
Or
you know
we
what?
will be watching Star Trek Discovery forever.
Look, it's like I want to say to a lot of guys, particularly in American society, yeah, you're all a bunch of good boys. Unfortunately, this world needs men right now.
Mm-hmm.
It needs you to be grown-up men, just like the ladies. There's a lot of good girls out there. Unfortunately, the world needs you to be grown-up women. In other words, adults. You know, it's time to snap out of the hypersensitivity. Anyway,
I got to tell you, Walter, everybody in the chat is agreeing with you.
I'm passionate about that. I just, my God, it just, and I think more and more people are starting to be open about, you know, enough with that crap.
Don McDouglas says there's a war on alpha males. I can agree with that.
Yeah, but let's. I mean, there are some beefy jackasses that act like a-holes out there.
Yeah,
you know,
that doesn't make them alphas.
Yeah, well, I mean, they might be the alpha type in physicality and attitude, and some of them are the biggest damn idiots on the face.
But they could still be like Alex Jones and cry on camera, you know.
You know, it's you know, it is what it is. But anyway, it's yeah. Sometimes I mock behaviors.
Yeah.
Okay. I try to mock behavior.
Not people.
Not individuals. So,
groups of individuals, maybe.
Oh, groups are fair game. Groups are fair game. I personally found in life, I don't know about you, but I love individuals much better than groups.
You know, I've always said that no matter which individual I end up talking to, I can always find something in common,
right?
You know, but once they get into that herd mentality and it's a group of people, you lose that ability to connect with individuals.
Well, you got those two kinds of people. You got the people who are true individuals and they can stay their individual self even in a group. Okay. But then you got all those human beings that crave the collective togetherness and the identifying with others, and they want to be in there, the social people, and they're the, you know, they tend to be the let's have a party people, and you know, a good time and life, la di la, and it's, you know, and those are the people that you take them as individuals, and you're right, you have much more interesting conversations, you learn what an interesting person they are, but once they get into that group mentality, it's, you know, forget about it. It's a waste of time. And you know, that's when murky thinking and emotion actually is pushed to the forefront instead of rational thought.
Yeah.
You know, we have a fair amount of emotion, you know, in our community, specifically where UFOs are concerned, you know.
Well, and the pop culture community as well, you know.
Yeah.
I will be the first person to admit that I cry during Star Trek all the time.
But that's an individual reaction to a dramatic stimulus, which
which is designed to evoke an emotional response.
Yeah, that's okay though. Like musicians use what the Joseph Farrell taught me was called affect, AFFEKT in the German spelling. And musicians, composers have done this for centuries. For instance, it's interesting. I'm glad this came up because I was just thinking about this yesterday. In Toccata and Fugue, okay, in D minor, the classic piece, right? I don't know what to call it because I'm not a musician, but there's this one point where you've been listening to the piece and it lifts you up, and then there's this light, kind of airy little, I guess it's a bridge or something. It's this dee 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 dee, and it's what was described to me as an affectation point where the composition has carried you up to this point, and that's like the high point where you're just totally, just completely not overwhelmed, but consumed with what the music is doing to you. And then from there, it's like you're flying with the music for the rest of the thing. Okay, for the rest of the piece. And that's what this affectation is to my understanding. Now, to bring it into a modern parlance, take the, I know this is going to seem silly to a lot of people, but we're talking about pop culture. Take the song Suspicious Minds, Elvis Presley's version, the good version, the great version. There's other good versions. Okay, but take the Elvis Presley one. If you listen to that song, you're into it, you're grooving it. Everybody knows Suspicious Minds, blah, blah, blah. Now, remember, at the time he released this song, everybody knew Elvis in a certain parlance. They knew his history. They knew the 50s stuff. They knew the movie stuff. They knew what Elvis was. He did his comeback the year that he releases Suspicious Minds. Okay? Now, and hold that thought right there. He releases Suspicious Minds after everybody's used to a certain things knowing about his career, right? Okay. You listen to Suspicious Minds, the song, and you're listening to the song, and then you get to the point where he does that slow part. Hope that our love survives, dry the tears from your eyes, blah, blah, blah. Let's not let a good thing die. And then to carry the song from the slow verse back into the, more up-tempo chorus, the drummer does this little riff. Okay, that he does nowhere else exactly like this in the song, and it's da 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 da, and then boom, the song goes into the up tempo again, and you're just in it. You're just you're riding the emotion and the background singers, and that what the drummer did there was affectation. It's brilliant. That little is the emotional high point of Suspicious Minds.
It's the emotional resonance.
Yes. And here's the thing. Then you go, it's the song, but at that point it becomes something even more. Now think about it. It also is symbolic of Elvis's own career because he released that when the year he came back. Now, a comeback after what? A lull. What is a low but a slow point? The song, the structure of Suspicious Minds is the structure of Elvis's career. It starts out, you're going along at speed, and it's like the Elvis you know. Then he has the low, and it gets slow. The song goes along. Then
it's like a roller coaster.
Slow, yeah. And then his career picks up again at the higher pace, and he becomes, Elvis. And the song goes on at this higher pace and this more dramatic thing. So it's really uncanny how that song does this psycho-emotional thing. Well, at the same time, almost predicts the direction Elvis's career is going to go.
Fascinating.
And what led me to this realization is that little
that little flamadiddle.
And it's like, now remember, Elvis's band, they were talented guys, okay? Elvis is not one of those who the Wrecking Crew did all their stuff for them. No. Elvis's guys, the band guys Elvis worked with were his band guys. And when you go back and listen to Elvis,
it's like Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
Yeah. Waylon Jennings, for crying out loud, is one of them. I mean, that guy was, amazing. But this is this affectation thing. Now, let's bring it back to what tonight's topic was. What is the emotional through line that is also part of the story in Somewhere in Time? The Rachmaninoff music piece. Matheson understood about the desire and the will and the role of emotion in building up the energy for Richard Collier to be able to jump back through time. And he puts the exclamation point or the resonant thing that he uses is in the movie it's Rachmaninoff. In the book, I think it's Mahler. But the point is that there is this musical thing, because music is this unique language which takes us to a place psycho-emotionally that takes us to this alpha level. Again, this power of the mind, this influence of the power of the mind in order to throw your consciousness. In other words, the body is not what's important. Who we are is the consciousness and that spirit or soul energy. And you're able to tap into this energy that's in there through the manipulation of all the senses, including the psycho-emotional senses. And Matheson clearly understood this. And that's why in the book it's Mahler and in the movie it's Rachmaninoff, which I think the Rachmaninoff works so much better. It's so much more, emotional in that
Galloping,
sense. Yeah. And I'd have to go back and read time and again to remember if there's something similar that Finney does. But Sescherine, I suspect that Richard Matheson certainly tried his own method. But we can't know for sure. And if my method is right, I'd like to think that, once he died, he was faced with the option of which direction you want to go. And
speaking of which direction do you want to go, Walter, I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce our very own Canadian Spider-Man. Who's muted, of course.
I was, yeah. Hello, welcome.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah.
hello.
Glad to have you back on the channel, Walter.
Oh,
fantastic.
Good to be back here, Canadian Spider-Man. Good to see you again.
You draw quite the crowd, obviously.
Oh,
yeah.
Gosh.
28 people watching. That's fantastic.
Each time they watch, they go, this guy's gone even crazier.
Our crowd likes that. Our crowd likes that.
The crazier, the better. No.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so we are giving away a copy of The Mystery of Ingersoll Lockwood, Volume 1 of the Lost Future series by Todd Wood and Walter Bosley. So, Canadian Spider-Man, are you ready to help me with the wheel?
Absolutely, yes. Jill, actually, I can't take any credit there. Jill has made the wheel.
Thank goodness for Anti-Derivative Jill.
And yeah, I'm sharing it.
One of these days I'll get my Boris Karloff right when I say that. They did the Monster Mash. Anti-Derivative Jill. Nah, doesn't really work. Okay, who we got on this wheel anyway?
We have Ivanovich, we have Skogli, we have Sigurd, we have Don McDouglas, Cam, we have Mr. M.H., we have Anti-Derivative Jill, and we have myself.
Right on. Well, you know what I say. Let's give that motherfucker a spin. Come on, man.
Did you say that? All right, there we go.
Come on, winner chicken dinner. Oh my goodness.
Wow. That's awesome. That's fantastic. I can't
What are the
bad that someone else couldn't have won, but that's fantastic.
This is too funny, Walter, because Canadian Spider-Man has won twice in a row. So it looks like it's rigged, but it's not rigged. It just looks like it's rigged.
No.
Anyway, congratulations, Canadian Spider-Man.
Yes.
Very well done.
I
very
appreciate the prize. The book is fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you can stop sharing, I'll close the screen, and
there we
I'll
go.
stop sharing if you can close.
And
The
I think
screen.
you'll like the book enough
Congrats.
that you'll want to read the second one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I will. Yeah, and then I won't expect to win that either. I'll.
Yeah. You could if he has me on here to talk about it sometime.
Shay Bean says, rigged.
That's fantastic. It looks bad, doesn't it?
Totes rigged.
We're on the up and up.
Congratulations, Canadian Spider-Man.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I'll bid you adieu. And
Pat S says, I hope Canadian Spider-Man wins every time. It makes him so uncomfortable.
It does.
That's good.
You don't. It shows, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much, Walter. Your time is valuable, but you're a big hit on our channel, as you can see.
Hey.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for volunteering.
I love coming on here. I really do. Thanks.
All right.
Me too.
Thank you, Cardinal. I'll
Thank you.
catch you both later.
All right.
Yep.
Wow, that was really cool. Well, I can give you his information later. So
Okay. Yeah. I'll get that out to him.
it's
Cool.
just interesting because he won last week.
When Micah was on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you watch that?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
I think by the time it was out, I was in Feverland.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah, I still have it today, but like I said, I've been going through all the tests, so they're pinpointing. At least my oncology team says we're not worried about what we see. They said my numbers are great, so that's always good to hear from them. Yeah, that was yesterday.
And ever shall it be so.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was a very fascinating episode, I have to say.
Well,
you blew my mind on several levels, and I didn't know I had all those levels left to blow.
let me say one thing.
Yeah.
And again, all the things that I've told you, I think these are the things that I think. These are not things that I'm claiming, wanting people to, these are not.
This is still speculation.
Yeah, this is what I sincerely suspect, but the better way to put it is I can't prove any of this, and I'm not
But it's awfully coincidental.
Yeah, I'm not trying to tell you this is what the government's doing, with time travel or something. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know. I mean, materially don't know if I'm right.
But if you didn't think there was a good chance, you probably wouldn't write books about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't talk about this. It's if I didn't think that I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Again, and I'm not trying to, I don't know what the word is. I guess
flim flam anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to be a flim flam guy. I'm not going to start making predictions and crap like that.
By the way, the Never Dead 4 or the Never Ready Div, I can never really tell. Says still no Joe Bob Briggs Cardinal. I'll bug him till he comes on.
Cool.
One day we will get him. Actually, John Bloom is a close personal friend of mine. So I have asked him to be on the channel, and he told me, sure, just talk to my agent. And his agent said, no, we can't do that. So I'm going to have to keep poking the bear. Eventually he'll go, all right.
Did the agent give a reason?
Nope. I think it probably had to do with how busy he was rather than, the fact that I couldn't pay him his going rate. But, but like I said, he knows who I am. If you see him out somewhere and you ask him about Gil, he'll go, oh yeah, that's the guy from Kansas. We actually used to correspond via email quite a bit back when he was doing Monster Vision.
Oh, okay.
So
well, if it were something other than schedule, I don't know. I'm the kind of guy I'd be telling my agent, oh, by the way, ran into a friend. He asked me to be on his show, and yeah, tell him yes, that's going to happen.
There you go.
But no, it's a friend of mine. I said I'd do it. Tell him yes, it's going to happen. Period.
Well, from
You
your
never
mouth
know.
to God's ears.
You never know what somebody's arrangement is.
Yeah. And after all, I mean, he's getting on, and he's doing the last drive-in on Shudder, so which is kind of the reinvention of Monster Vision.
Cool.
Except they can show, the blood, breasts, and beasts that he's always talking about.
They can show like the full R-rated versions of these things, because if you, I mean,
because it's online, it's their own network.
Yeah, but also that's kind of when you're. I mean, I grew up on those R-rated horror movies, at the drive-in from the late '60s on through the '70s and stuff, and that's the nature of that beast. That's part of the mix that makes those things the classics, that they are, particularly in B cinema. Are those R-rated elements, the violence, the nudity, the what have you.
Yeah, well, that's what makes it an exploitation film, and I think those films have a lot to teach us.
Yes, they do. They do indeed.
But that's probably a topic for a different day.
Yes, it is.
So, since we've gotten 2 hours and 17 minutes under our belt, we should probably wrap it up. Walter, I want to thank you again for an incredible, mind-blowing episode. I think this is probably the best episode that we've had so far.
Cool. I appreciate it. When I talk about these things, I'm very sincere about all this stuff.
And you're very passionate.
I appreciate your audience interest in it. So thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. And we look forward to having you on next month. Now, tomorrow, we are actually going to have a remote viewer on a very special episode of Into the Fringe. We used to have Into the Fringe on Thursdays, then I moved it to Wednesdays. Now, tomorrow, Corian, Witch in Residence, is going to be on the show, and I tasked him with remote viewing Antarctica and the far side of the moon.
Cool.
And I told him, don't do it if it's, too taxing or, scary or whatever. But he reported back to me and he said, boy, I have some really interesting results for you. So
cool.
Tune in again tomorrow from 7 to 9, and we will talk about what's going on the far side of the moon and in Antarctica. And until then, it's Cardinal Sin out.